Revenge with Karen.
I knew it was over the moment Cheryl moved my nameplate off the glass wall and onto the beige cubicle outside the printer room. No memo, no conversation, just a dull clack as she stuck it beside the toner refill list like I was now part of office maintenance. I used to have a door. I used to build the damn doors, metaphorically and literally, considering I was the one who brokered the original lease agreement when this company was 3 nerds and a whiteboard with permanent marker stains. But here I was, 15 years later, watching the new VP, a woman whose last corporate job was chair of the HOA newsletter committee, shuffle me off like expired yogurt at the back of the fridge. Cheryl wasn't just anyone. She was Roger's mother. Roger, being our current CEO, known mostly for his uncanny ability to burn investor trust like it was incense at a yoga studio. When the board gave her the VP title in honor of her guidance, what they really meant was, keep her busy so she doesn't tank morale or sue us. Her idea of strategic vision was telling interns to smile more during all-hands meetings and commissioning a $9,000 sculpture that looked like a deflated hedgehog to boost creativity. The slide began subtle. Invites to leadership syncs disappeared. Must have been a calendar error. Then project briefs started arriving with my name conveniently missing, like I'd been auto-removed by a very judgmental AI. The final cherry? My office, the one with a view of the skyline I helped pay for when we couldn't afford ergonomic chairs, was repurposed for executive client hospitality. Which, in practice, and Cheryl used it to take naps and watch Hallmark movies on her tablet with subtitles on. I didn't yell. I didn't send long emails in caps lock. I just watched, cataloged, let them think I was melting into irrelevance while I sat through meetings like a ghost at her own funeral, scribbling in the margins of my notebook, while Cheryl claimed we were pivoting to the bleeding edge of microservice verticals. Whatever the hell that meant, I'm pretty sure she picked the phrase up from a TED talk that auto-played after a cake recipe. Oh, and in case you're wondering, no, I didn't sell my shares. Not even when Roger begged during the Series B panic, sweating through his Brooks Brothers shirt while stammering about strategic dilution. My late husband, God rest his brilliant paranoid soul, set up a trust so dense you'd need an archaeologist and a blood oath to unravel it. Every year, he updated one line, remained silent until public offering. That line was about to get its moment. But before we get there, do us a quick favor. If you've been listening this far, hit that subscribe button and give this story a like. It's free, takes half a second, and it genuinely helps our little storytelling crew keep spinning tales like this instead of, updating toner refill lists. Anyway, the nail in the coffin came last Thursday, 2 days before the IPO pitch. Cheryl sashayed over to my cubicle, yes, she sashays like a drunk flamingo, and tapped my monitor with a pink acrylic nail. You'll be attending the pitch, of course, just to observe. It's important the original team feels included. Symbolically, I smiled, nodded, didn't say a word. But I did pull open my bottom drawer, blew the dust off a jacket I hadn't worn since we signed our first client, laid it across my lap. There's something ceremonial about armor, even if it's just a threadbare blazer with elbow creases and a faint smell of ambition. They wanted me to be a relic, a footnote, but I wasn't finished. Not yet. I was elbow deep in a spreadsheet no one had asked me to do when Molly, my assistant, leaned in like she was passing state secrets. She's been with me for 6 years, bright, sharp, and entirely too good for the circus, but loyal to a fault. Didn't even bother lowering her voice this time. They booked a photographer for Thursday, she whispered. Full setup. Lighting rig, makeup artist, everything. I squinted at her. For the IPO deck, she nodded, lips tight. Future leadership team portraits. Cheryl's calling it the face of tomorrow. You're not on the list. Of course I wasn't. Molly waited like I might scream or at least throw a stapler. Instead, I calmly clicked save on my worksheet and said, I guess it's time I looked the part of yesterday. I opened the bottom drawer, the one I hadn't touched in years except to stuff receipts and backup mascara, and pulled out the jacket. It was navy wool with worn elbows, a stain near the cuff that might have been soy sauce or the blood of optimism, unclear. I wore that thing the day we closed our first angel round. The day I signed the building lease. Day I stayed until 2 a.m. rewriting a client proposal Roger had botched because he thought K-Piss were some kind of energy drink. I held the blazer against my chest, eyes closed. It still smelled like coffee, whiteboard ink, and the ghost of someone who believed she mattered. And then, like muscle memory, I opened my Google Calendar and created a new event. Call broker, confirm shares, recurring weekly. 15 minutes. Private. It wasn't that I had forgotten, it's that I hadn't needed to remember until now. Back when we were living on vending machine pretzels and sweat equity, my husband, Tom, handled our finances. Financial planner by day, disaster scenario hobbyist by night. He didn't believe in trusting boards or brothers-in-law. When Roger offered me an early exit with a generous payout after Series A, Tom laughed so hard he choked on his oatmeal. I still remember his face, serious after he wiped his mouth with a napkin from the glove box. We were sitting in our used Honda Civic, and I had tears in my eyes from stress. He just said, "Never sell your shares unless you're ready to walk away." Completely. The only thing more powerful than being at the table is owning the tablecloth. That was the same year he set up the trust. Shell entity, anonymous holding company. Everything perfectly legal, perfectly invisible. Even made sure the address was tied to a commercial mailbox 2 towns over. It was excessive. It was brilliant. It was him. I hadn't touched it in years. I just let it sit there, growing quietly with each round, each valuation bump, each acquisition. No one ever asked. No one ever checked. That's the funny thing about being erased. Eventually they forget you're even part of the picture. Makes it real easy to surprise them. Molly hovered. "Are you okay?" Slid the blazer onto the back of my chair. "Tell Cheryl I'll need hair and makeup Thursday morning. We want to look our best, don't we?" She blinked. "But you're not in the shoot?" I smiled. "Not yet." Then I opened a new tab and typed my broker's number. It was still memorized. Still burned into the back of my skull like the PIN on the office alarm system. I installed myself back when we could barely afford paper. Thursday was coming fast. The lights, the pitch, the fanfare, the false humility, the power posturing. But I wasn't planning to sit quietly in the second row like a trophy wife at a congressional hearing. No, I had a script of my own. And for the first time in years, I felt like the lead again. Thursday came wrapped in nerves and fake gratitude. You could smell the cologne of desperation wafting off Roger's suit from across the conference room. They'd cleared the whole West Wing for this thing. Shiny welcome signs, a custom espresso bar, even those stupid little fruit-infused water dispensers that taste like regret. I walked in 10 minutes early, just like I always used to, and felt the air shift like someone opened a window to let the ghost of competence drift through. Cheryl was already perched near the front, fussing with a silk scarf that cost more than my first car. She caught sight of me and smiled the kind of smile that belongs on a predator with good dental coverage. "Well," she said, arms wide like she was welcoming me to my own execution. "Brenda, glad you found a seat." I looked around. Half the chairs had place cards, VP, CFO, CMO, Head of Strategic Vision, which I'm 90% sure is a title Cheryl invented to give Roger's tennis buddy a paycheck. No card for me, of course, but I came prepared. I pulled a chair from the back row and planted it along the side wall, dead center. Close enough to watch everything, far enough to be ignored, just the way they wanted it. Cheryl approached, heels clicking like a countdown. Her voice dropped an octave, still sweet but sharp around the edges. "You'll be observing, of course. We need to show cohesion, not confusion." "Optics, dear." I gave her a blank smile, of course. Wouldn't want to interrupt the family reunion. She laughed too hard at that, the kind of laugh people used to erase witnesses. Then she leaned closer. "We were sharing secrets instead of scars. You were lucky we tolerated you this long," she said softly, eyes like polished steel. "I told Roger to cut you loose after Series C, but he said it'd look bad. Legacy founders and all that. Honestly, you're like an old thermostat, still mounted on the wall, but nobody remembers to check if you're working." There it was. The line she'd been dying to deliver. Years of passive aggression culminated into one tidy gut punch. I felt Molly stiffen from 3 feet away, pretending not to listen while she fussed with the presentation laptop. I didn't flinch. Instead, I reached up and adjusted my blazer. Nice and slow. Smoothed the lapel, tugged the sleeve, and met Cheryl's eyes with the kind of calm that makes people nervous without knowing why. "Let's make this memorable," I said. Her smile twitched, just a hair. She turned on her heel and walked away without another word. The rest of the team trickled in, full of caffeinated adrenaline and rehearsed charm. Roger shook hands like a man trying to grip relevance. The new head of product, who once asked me if profit margin was a supply chain term, offered me a lukewarm nod before taking his assigned seat. Photographers hovered near the projection screen, adjusting light levels and angles. One of them paused when he saw me sitting alone. "Ma'am, are you in the leadership chute?" Cheryl swooped in before I could answer. "No, he's just observing." He apologized. I didn't correct him. Just sat there with my hands folded and my face neutral. But inside, I was tallying everything: who smirked, who whispered, who pretended not to see me. It wasn't bitterness, it was accounting. I've always been good with numbers. The lights dimmed. The screen lit up. Roger stood at the head of the table, beaming like a kid who found the keys to the liquor cabinet. "Good morning, everyone," he began. "Thank you for being here for the most important day in our company's journey." Important, sure, but not for the reasons they thought. Because this wasn't just a pitch. This wasn't just an IPO roadshow or a parade of polished nonsense. This was a battlefield, and I was done observing. The pitch deck was projected onto a 10-foot screen with all the subtlety of a peacock in heat. Glossy, animated, full of self-congratulatory graphs that looked impressive until you actually read the axes. Roger was 3 slides deep into his company evolution timeline, and that's when I saw it. My name gone. The timeline started with a dramatic shot of the original warehouse space and 2 blurry photos of Roger and the other co-founder, Martin. No mention of me, not even a photo. Just a gap, like the company had spontaneously sprouted a legal department and a customer base out of the floorboards. Slide after slide showed Roger's ascension from lead strategist, whatever that means, to visionary CEO. Cheryl narrated like she was hosting a coronation, using phrases like transformational growth and agile disruption, so often I wondered if she had them tattooed under that scarf. But I wasn't surprised. I was prepared. Don't survive 15 years in a company that forgets who built the floors without learning to anticipate erasure. I'd seen this coming the moment they started referring to my department as legacy ops, like it was a dusty attic full of cobwebs and regrets. Still, watching it happen on screen, seeing myself edited out like a bad first marriage, hit somewhere low and deep. Not rage, not even sadness. Just confirmation. The first investor entered the room with a smile wide enough to be tactical. Mr. Devlin, crisp charcoal suit. No tie. Rolex, understated but unmistakable. He looked like a man who already knew the outcome, but wanted to enjoy the theater of it. Behind him, a dozen other suits filed in, men and women with clipboards and iPads, and the kind of smiles that never reached their eyes. Devlin took his seat at the head of the table without waiting for Roger to finish whatever sentence he was mangling. He didn't even glance at the screen. Just folded his hands and said, "So, who's your new visionary?" Roger practically giggled. "That'd be our head of innovation, my son, Tyler. He's fresh out of Stanford with a dual MBA in tech and sustainable capital strategies." Translation: trust fund baby with a bullet point resume and the strategic depth of a kiddie pool. Tyler beamed and waved like a kid on a field trip. "Happy to be here." Devlin didn't blink. "Of course you are." Then, like fate couldn't resist a good cue, the CFO cleared his throat and leaned forward with the practiced unease of someone who didn't want to say what he was about to say. "Before we get too deep," he began, "there's one minor discrepancy we're still ironing out. Won't affect the pitch, but there's a legacy trust account holding about 17.5% equity that predates our Series A. Legal's trying to trace it now. Could be an angel investor we never properly documented." My heart gave one sharp kick. I kept my face still, barely a twitch. Cheryl chuckled lightly, like the idea of mystery equity was an adorable hiccup, probably just an accounting blip. "We'll get it sorted." Devlin raised an eyebrow. 17.5% isn't a blip. It's a stake, a voice. Roger shifted in his seat. "We've had no contact with whoever it is. For all we know, they passed away or lost interest." That's when I smiled, just a little, because I was sitting right there, breathing, listening, holding 17.5% of the company's skin in my back pocket like a folded map to their egos. They'd spent years building a castle on top of my silence. Now the foundation was starting to tremble, and they didn't even know whose name was carved into the cornerstone. I glanced over at Molly. She was tapping something on her tablet, not looking at me but nodding ever so slightly. On track, call confirmed, timeline aligned. The irony was so thick I could have spread it on toast. They had the right room, the right suits, the right buzzwords, but the wrong assumptions. And that's the fatal flaw in forgetting people. Stop seeing them as dangerous, so I sat there. Quiet, invisible, and let the irony bloom. Mr. Devlin didn't waste time with small talk. The moment Cheryl wrapped up her cloying, "We're so honored to have you" monologue, he clicked his pen once, sharp and surgical, and leaned forward with a face carved out of stone and scrutiny. "I've reviewed your growth trajectory," he said, voice smooth as a scalpel. "Let's walk through your revenue model, shall we? Specifically post-acquisition integration costs. You've positioned yourselves as a turnkey platform. Explain how you'll absorb 3 legacy systems without doubling overhead." Cheryl opened her mouth faster than Roger could exhale. "Of course, that was my initiative, actually. We identified redundancies early on. I spearheaded our modular architecture shift." I blinked. That was me. 2 years ago, a meeting she didn't attend because she was at a spa retreat aligning her vibration. I'd stayed up 3 nights mapping the integration tiers and negotiating back-end compatibility with the CTO of the acquired firm. But sure, let's give Cheryl the crown and the gold robe. Devlin's pen tapped once. "Interesting. And your data sovereignty compliance plan?" Cheryl paused. Eyes flicked to the side. "Well, we're exploring hybrid frameworks." Roger jumped in. "Which Tyler?" beamed at his son, "is leading." Tyler, still radiating LinkedIn influencer energy, cleared his throat. "Yes. So we're leveraging scalable elastic nodes for compartmentalized sovereignty. Think AWS meets GDPR on Rails. That's not a thing." Devlin tilted his head, slow and deliberate. "So you've confirmed compliance for EMEA rollout." Tyler's mouth opened, closed. "Well, not finalized, but we have a roadmap." Devlin didn't blink. "Who's managing your legal exposure on that?" The room froze. Tyler looked helplessly at Cheryl, who smiled like a nervous flight attendant trying to land a crashing plane with compliments. That's when I spoke. "Our provisional exposure is currently sub 5% across jurisdictions," I said, not loud, not soft, just enough for Devlin to turn toward me. "We deferred rollout until cross-certification in Q4. The roadmap was my draft. It's on the shared drive under Brenda Legal EMEA 2024 v3 if you'd like a copy." Tyler looked like he'd swallowed a thumbtack. Devlin studied me, really studied me, then nodded once. "Good to know someone here reads the footnotes." Cheryl tried to recover, clapping her hands once. "Let's move to financials. We've had exponential YOY growth." Tyler's introduced exciting models for investor returns. The projector switched to a slide with more glitter than clarity. Tyler launched into a monologue that included phrases like disruption elasticity and meta-revenue loops, which meant nothing and impressed no one. Devlin stopped him with one raised hand. "And your equity breakdown is finalized?" he asked. Not accusing, just bored. Like he already knew the answer, but was testing to see how deep the hole went. CFO Carl, to his credit, looked like he wanted to crawl into the water cooler, cleared his throat. "Yes, all shareholder positions and voting blocks are stable, with the exception of one historical trust that hasn't responded to outreach." Devlin leaned back. "The one holding 17.5%? "Yes," Carl nodded. "Legal has it flagged. We're continuing efforts to identify the stakeholder." Devlin looked around the table, slowly, moving forward with an IPO despite a material ownership gap. Cheryl laughed nervously. "It's not a gap, it's just a formality. They haven't been active in years." Roger muttered something about dead paper. Tyler sipped his water like it might contain answers. And I sat there, watching them all flail like fish in a barrel that someone had just set on fire. Devlin's eyes landed on me again, just for beat. He knew something was off. He didn't have the full picture. The corners were curling up, and he was about to start peeling. Around the table, you could feel it. The pitch was wobbling. Not crashing, not yet, but something had shifted. The scent of control was leaving Cheryl's perfume cloud and settling somewhere closer to me. The clock on the wall read 11:38, 9 minutes to go. My phone buzzed under the table at exactly 11:45, 1 minute early. Of course it was. Jeff never missed. Not in 15 years. Not when Tom died. Not when the IRS tried to audit the trust and left looking like they'd been slapped with a broom made of red tape and Latin clauses. Text message, confirmed, call on time. Timeline locked, hold position. I didn't smile. I didn't blink. I just slipped the phone back into my jacket pocket and lifted my eyes to meet Molly's across the room. No nod, no signal. Just a fraction of a breath, a pulse of silent agreement, and I folded my hands. The VP stood, scarf floating like a villain's cape caught in a wind machine. She looked radiant in the way a thunderstorm does from a distance, beautiful until it's overhead and pulling shingles off your house. Cheryl loved the spotlight like a houseplant loves sunlight. she'd die without it. We're incredibly proud of what this company has become, she began, voice full of syrup and power, a tiny startup with duct-taped desks to a global platform of innovation and trust. I wondered if she meant the trust that legally owned their necks. She clicked to the final slide, the company logo, artfully embossed over a photo of a sunrise. Very subtle, very new era. We've outgrown our past, she said, making a show of scanning the room, and outdated methods. What got us here won't get us there. That's why today you're not just investing in a company, or investing in its future, in them. She gestured toward Roger and Tyler like she was handing out golden tickets. The investors offered polite nods, scribbling nothing in particular. A few glanced at Devlin. He remained still. I could feel Molly watching me, hands folded tightly in her lap, eyes flicking between Cheryl and the clock like a stage manager waiting for the curtain to fall on the wrong play. 11:46. Cheryl turned her gaze to me. And of course, honor the contributions of those who have supported us along the way, she added, eyes sharp, voice flat, even those no longer actively shaping our direction. Translation: sit still, Grandma, your time's up. I tilted my head slowly, let the silence stretch. Then I stood, not dramatically, just enough for my voice to carry evenly across the room. Some legacies, I said calmly, don't disappear just because you stop mentioning them. Cheryl's smile twitched. Tyler looked up, puzzled. Roger shifted in his chair like someone noticing the fire alarm had been blinking red for the last 10 minutes. Devlin turned fully toward me now. Pen down, elbows on the table. The air changed, not a gust, not a breeze, but that unmistakable stillness that comes right before something snaps. Like the second before a rubber band finally gives in, or the pause between lightning and thunder. You could hear every breath in the room. Then the door opened. Junior staffer poked his head in, eyes wide. Mr. Devlin, your call's on speaker. It's urgent. Devlin didn't even look surprised. He stood, calmly, put it through. The room had that eerie stillness you only get in hospitals and bomb shelters, everyone breathing, no one moving. Legal had begun sliding signature packets across the table. Fountain pens were uncapped. The CFO was sweating through his collar. Roger kept tugging at his sleeve like it might reveal a better future underneath. Devlin's phone lit up. Line 1, the assistant said, placing it in front of him. He pressed speaker without looking, still watching Cheryl with those flat investor eyes that miss nothing. A voice came through, crisp and surgical. Hi, Mr. Devlin. This is Jeffrey Langston with Langston and Foster Fiduciary. Just confirming the 17.5% founder stake under the Brenda Wilkes Trust. Valuation is approximately $110 million. Wire confirmation pending per standing agreement. Please let us know if any further verification is required before close. Silence, not the polite kind. The air has been yanked out of the room kind. Someone dropped a pen, clattered across the table like a firecracker. Cheryl's smile didn't just fade, it curdled. Her jaw clenched so tight, I thought I heard a molar crack. Roger blinked 3 times and turned to the CFO like he'd just learned his parachute was packed with laundry. Tyler, God bless him, looked up and said, Wait, who's Brenda Wilkes? Devlin slowly reached down and muted the phone, then turned. Not to me, to her. You mocked her? He asked, low and steady, like a man used to watching empires pretend they hadn't just stepped on a landmine. Cheryl opened her mouth, closed it. Hand twitched toward her scarf like it might help her explain away the past 15 years. No one spoke. All eyes shifted to me. I didn't move, I didn't nod, I didn't even blink. I just sat, the ghost of the company, the footnote, the tolerated relic, and now, apparently, the woman holding the largest unchecked ownership stake in the room. 17.5%. Enough to stop a vote. Enough to demand a seat. Enough to, well, let's not spoil the rest. Across the table, Roger looked like he'd just aged a decade. Cheryl was frozen, lips slightly parted, fingers rigid. Tyler stared at me like he was trying to remember if we'd ever even met. Devlin didn't say anything else. He just reached forward, tapped the phone off speaker, and leaned back in his chair like he was preparing to watch a very different kind of show. The room was no longer theirs, and they knew it. Door burst open like the building had suddenly remembered it had rules. 2 legal associates scrambled in, one holding a thick stack of documents, the other pale enough to be mistaken for printer paper. Carl, the CFO, stood up so fast he knocked over his water. No one bothered to clean it. Stop, one of the legal guys said, breathless. Don't sign anything. Cheryl stood. Excuse me? But legal wasn't looking at her. They were looking at me. Brenda Wilkes Trust is explicitly named in the original articles of formation, the lead associate said, voice quivering but firm. Section 4B.3, Founder Equity Voting Rights. Tied to controlling interest at the point of any liquidity event, including IPO. Devlin tilted his head slightly. Meaning, legal swallowed. Meaning Miss Wilkes' equity, as a founding shareholder, supersedes all post-series adjustments during a public transition. All current board appointments not ratified by her trust are invalid, dead, silence. Roger opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Tyler leaned back so hard he almost tipped his chair. And Cheryl looked like someone had just whispered the end of her story straight into her bloodstream. This must be outdated, she stammered. We did a full charter review in 2020. The associate held up a page. You missed section 17, subsection F. It was filed under the original entity name before the rebrand. It's still active and enforceable. Cheryl turned to Carl. You said the trust wasn't active. Carl looked like he wanted to melt into the carpet. We didn't know who held it, I stood. Not to grandstand, not to gloat, just to move. Every eye in the room followed me as I walked, slowly, calmly, to the front of the room. I placed a hand on the table, fingers spread wide. I was reclaiming something I'd never actually lost. I believe, I said, looking directly at Devlin, we need to halt this pitch. Cheryl made a sound, half sputter, half gasp. I didn't look at her. There's a governance correction to make, I continued. And I think you'll agree it's unwise to proceed under a board structure that's no longer legally valid. Devlin studied me for a long beat, then nodded slowly, with a flicker of something close to respect. Miss Wilkes, he said, I speak to you privately. Of course, I replied. As we turned toward the side conference room, I heard Roger mutter something incoherent. Tyler whispered, what just happened, like a toddler who just watched Santa Claus get arrested. But Cheryl said nothing. Her mouth was open, eyes darting, chest rising, and falling like she was waiting to wake up from a nightmare she'd written herself into. She didn't follow us. She didn't even move. Because in that moment, she knew it was over. 3 hours later, the boardroom looked like a war memorial dressed in ergonomic chairs. Same walls, same windows, same fake potted plant in the corner, but the atmosphere had shifted like gravity found a new favorite. I sat at the head of the table now. No one said it out loud. No brass band. No banner with my name in all caps. But the paperwork sat in front of me, signed and countersigned. Devlin's team had moved faster than I thought possible, must have had a file on this scenario for months. Men like him don't invest, they colonize, and they never let the map makers lie. My name was back on the deck. Brenda Wilkes, co-founder, strategic lead. It sat there in clean Helvetica on the third slide like it had never been erased. Roger, to his credit, tried to look upbeat. Kept clearing his throat like optimism might crawl out and save him. Cheryl hadn't returned. Her chair was empty. Her resignation letter, however, was not. It sat neatly in the center of the table, freshly printed, ink still drying, effective immediately. No fanfare, just surrender in a serif font. Tyler looked like someone had explained mortgages to him for the first time. Pale, silent, possibly Googling how to survive a corporate decapitation under the table. Devlin flipped the final page of the revised term sheet and tapped it once. We're comfortable proceeding under the new governance structure, he said, voice polite but steely. Our group believes in companies where experience and integrity aren't optional. I nodded once. Then we accept. He slid the signed agreement toward me. The pen had more weight than it should have. I picked it up. Signed, that was it. The shift wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was just real, final, solid. I stood, blazer smooth and sharp across my shoulders. Same one I wore when I fought for our first lease. When I took the 3 a.m. calls from investors who doubted us. When I sat in that office with my husband's voice in my ear telling me to never sell unless you're ready to walk away completely. And now, I wasn't walking away. I was walking through. I turned to Roger, whose smile had finally cracked. One more thing, I said. He looked up, hopeful. Hopeful was a mistake. I've reassigned the executive suite, I continued, calm as a Sunday sermon. Your mother's former office will now belong to our incoming chief ethics officer. She starts Monday. The silence that followed wasn't even stunned, it was hollow. Like someone had scooped the air out of the room and left everyone blinking inside the vacuum. I didn't stay to watch the collapse. I nodded once to Devlin, to Molly, walked to the door, opened it, and left. My heels echoed in the hallway like punctuation, marks on the end of a very long sentence. You're the real stars of the corporate jungle. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe, or I'll flick the switch on your old cubicle memories.